That's a very good question, Charles. You know, the issue is that if you look at the 15 member states of ECOWAS, most of them are fighting jihadists. For example, Nigeria, which is one of the biggest contributors, is also engaged in the counterinsurgency operation in the north. Talk less of other threats that do exist. So each country within the ECOWAS bloc has domestic issues to deal with. So it's not just about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So everyone has distractions, as we call them. So effectively, yes, you're right. Mali is facing an existential threat. Recently, we've seen more than, I think, 3 or 4 aircraft being shot down by a group in the northern part, claiming to be the Azawad, secessionist group. They've said they're working together with Jenim, which is the Al-Qaeda's alliance in that part of the country. So Mali has a bigger threat, just like Burkina Faso and Niger. But again, it effectively means each and every one of these ECOWAS countries, none of them, comes without a military or an insecurity burden that they will go into a war. So any war would destabilize the entire region. We don't want to see a war, Charles. But I think at this point in time, if there were any plans for ECOWAS, to carry out that military intervention, they may have to now shield their swords.
And do you expect other countries, even if they don't have military coups, but just, Sahel countries, the attraction of working together to join this alliance?
Potentially. When you have an alliance that has an open door policy, it's made it very clear that it welcomes its members, then of course, we could potentially have other countries joining. Recently, 24 hours behind, we heard of a potential military coup in Congo-Brazzaville, but the government has denied that this is, some kind of a rumor. Of course, we know, Charles, that when the coup takes place, a number of hours you've got to give it in order for it to, kind of solidify. We're not saying that there is a coup taking place in Congo-Brazzaville, but each government would always deny initially that there is an ongoing coup in his country. But it creates a high level of volatility at this point in time when you have 3 countries coming together and forming an alliance and saying we welcome members who are interested. And perhaps this could give some oxygen to brave military men who want to topple governments under the guise of lack of good grasp of the economy or insecurity and all that. And unfortunately, most African countries have those dynamics as we speak.
Yeah, I know most of you must have heard about the security pact that has been signed between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. And they have even gone one step further to invite anyone who wishes to sign in as a member. So I think this is a very important thing they've done, because they are now trying to work together to tackle insecurity issues they are all facing. So I want us to watch this video, and while we watch, let's share our thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Because like I have said before, our show is a conversational one, and everyone is welcome to share their thoughts and opinions about what they think, right? So let's get on with the video.
So what are the key points of this alliance which effectively binds the signatories to assist one another militarily in the event of an attack on any of them?
Yeah, so we're calling this the Liptako-Gourma Alliance, which, of course, as you rightly mentioned in the intro, was signed between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Article 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are quite important, because Article 4 talks about a mutual assistance in terms of counterterrorism, which all 3 states are experiencing, especially at the triangle of Liptako-Gourma, facing existential threat, from jihadists, linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS. So I think that's quite important because, of course, they've distanced themselves away from France, which used to play an apparent role in counterterrorism. They've also asked MINUSMA to leave, especially from Malian side. The UN peacekeeping force. So therefore, they are, countries like Mali, Burkina Faso are left on their own. So I think Article 4 is quite important, which makes it clear that 3 of these countries would come as a group to, counter terrorism. But
and the 3 of them share borders.
Of course, they share borders. So that effectively means the G5 Sahel, which was established, is effectively dead. So that's a new alliance. Article 5 talks about an alliance to prevent aggression, which may be in reference to the ECOWAS attempt or the ECOWAS proclamation that it may use force, to invade the country. So it talks about that alliance to prevent any aggression. Article 6.
Yeah, I think this is very important, right? And I understand that many people have mentioned the fact that kicking out the French wasn't a good idea due to the security issues in the Sahel, or asking the UN mission there they call it MINISMA, to leave Mali wasn't really a good idea. But I think that they are forgetting one important factor. These people have been there for 10 years plus, right? Why is it that they have not succeeded in really tackling this security challenge? That's the problem I always ask anyone that is in support of letting these foreign forces stay on African soil. I tell them, I understand we have challenges. I understand we are going through a lot in Africa. But the solution will not be letting foreigners solve our problems. That is not going to be the solution. The solution would be us, the Africans, realizing that we have a serious problem and we are working together to solve these problems. That is when we are ever going to have a solution to our problems. Because remember, no one is ever going to treat your house as you would. No one is ever going to look after your belongings as you would. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have realized this, and they have decided to come together to start figuring out a solution to the security crisis in the Sahel. It might take some time. These things always take time, and there might be some casualties along the way. But remember, they will learn how to resolve this problem. They will get better at handling their own problems, and they will become great at tackling this jihadist movement in the Sahel. So I believe that what they did was a fantastic thing, and Africa or Africans should celebrate them. But let's continue.
Which is quite important. It reminds me of the NATO Article 5, which says an attack on one member would definitely, resort to an attack on all. So which means they are now creating some kind of a tripartite alliance.
Right. Sort of like a NATO
alliance,
yeah.
Of course, but more or less like Warsaw Pact, because of course NATO came first.
Yes.
And then Warsaw Pact came in 1955, which of course included the Soviet Union and 7 other states. Article 7 and 8 speaks more of that same mutual agreement. But I think the most important one, which is how is it going to be financed? They've made it clear under Article 10 that each member is going to be responsible for financing, this alliance. And of course, Article 11, which you mentioned, says we are open to have new members,
right.
Just in case you're a country that has the same ideology, or you perhaps you're also one of those countries which is preparing for a military intervention. Then of course you have
come over.
Of course, yeah. You would have an alliance to rely on. So
right.
It's a threat to the regional bloc, ECOWAS, because effectively what we're seeing here is that we are having now a split of ECOWAS, but not just a split, but an anti-ECOWAS regional movement, which of course, might rival what we used to call ECOMOG, which is the ECOWAS standby force.
Well, let me pick you up on that last thing you just said, because that is obviously very interesting. Is it likely this alliance to discourage an ECOWAS regional force from invading any of the countries and possibly encourage military officers who are considering carrying out coups and reassure them that they'll be defended? I'm trying to understand what the implications.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as calling it an anti-ECOWAS body or institution. I wouldn't put it that way. I would think that it's more of a deterrent for these military juntas. Because remember, if they do not unite, they will have a lot of things to deal with, because France is not sleeping. I have said this many times, right? France is not just lying there and thinking that, oh, these people, they kick us out, and so we should just let them be. No, that's not what France is thinking. France is working underground. France is planning things. France is looking for fractions to involve themselves with. France is looking for the least argument or disagreement within the military juntas so that they can support one camp or the other. France is looking for a way to infiltrate this government and break them from within. The only way they can survive this is a unity among themselves. That is the only way. Because if they stay apart, if they just concentrate on their respective countries, ECOWAS might invade. France might infiltrate them. So for someone to think that this is an anti-ECOWAS bloc, that person must have gone too far with this. Because I believe that these countries do not have anything against ECOWAS. They are not challenging ECOWAS. They are not attacking ECOWAS. They just want to be left alone. ECOWAS is the one attacking them. ECOWAS is the one trying to force things on them, not the other way around. So if ECOWAS thought that they cannot coexist together, then fine. They are willing to be themselves and let ECOWAS be herself. It's just as simple as that. But if ECOWAS realize that these countries are very important within the group, then they should look for a way to start talking with these juntas. They should look for a way to start working together. They should look for a way to even support this defense pact in order for them to tackle the challenges they are facing in the Sahel. And Nigeria is also having a lot of security challenges. They might just help Nigeria with their Boko Haram issue. So we should stop relying on Western forces to do our work for us. We must start doing things ourselves. Let's continue.
Yeah, so as I mentioned on the article 11, obviously what they're saying is that any new member state, perhaps will be welcome. So it would then mean that any country that military decides to take power would have friends in the Sahel to rely on. So it could potentially be an incentive for any coup plans that are on the way.
Right, but would it be a disincentive for ECOWAS?
Now, in terms of ECOWAS, I'm not sure that ECOWAS was expecting such an alliance, because of course what that means, for ECOWAS is that they have to go back to the drawing board in planning for any military intervention. So initially, ECOWAS was, thinking of invading Niger or sending a military intervention into Niger. Now the whole process has changed. We're talking about 2 more countries coming into. That means the estimate of war or military intervention that ECOWAS carried out initially will then have to be revised, because now effectively they are facing 3 states, not just Niger alone. So that means even if ECOWAS had a timetable, which it did mention that it had, then that timetable must be changed in order to be able to deal with the order of battle.
And of course, being someone who's a military assessor yourself, I mean, you're talking about 3 countries facing ECOWAS. I mean, when you look at their military strength, I mean, that would really be a challenge for them, wouldn't it?
It would be a challenge, but not just the military strength, but the fact that you now have to deal with, initially, what ECOWAS was thinking was, let's invade Niger. Now you have Niger, which is surrounded by 7 borders, countries, shares borders with 7 countries. Burkina Faso, it means ECOWAS has to plan for
potential. I understand that. So that's what I'm saying. So the challenge is much bigger.
It's much bigger now for ECOWAS,
but and almost impossible.
Well, I think it would be something ECOWAS has to do around about 10 in terms of thinking that this is going to be a quick war. It will achieve its mission as quickly as it thought. Now we're talking about regional bloc against the regional bloc.
Extraordinary, but obviously these countries you mentioned, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, they're already fighting jihadist movements in their countries, which has stretched their armies to breaking point, I would imagine. And I'm wondering how much trying to fight off an ECOWAS fighting force will test those armies of these three countries, I mean, to the absolute limit.
That's a very good question, Charles. The issue is that if you look at the 15 member states of ECOWAS, most of them are fighting jihadists. For example, Nigeria, which is one of the biggest contributors, is also engaged in the counterinsurgency operation in the north. Talk less of other threats that do exist. So each country within the ECOWAS bloc has domestic issues to deal with. So it's not just about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. So everyone has distractions, as we call them. So effectively, yes, you're right. Mali is facing an existential threat. Recently, we've seen more than, I think, 3 or 4 aircraft being shot down by a group in the northern part, claiming to be the Azawad, secessionist group. They've said they're working together with Jenim, which is the Al-Qaeda's alliance in that part of the country. So Mali has a bigger threat, just like Burkina Faso and Niger. But again, it effectively means each and every one of these ECOWAS countries, none of them, comes without a military or an insecurity burden that they will go into a war. So any war would destabilize the entire region. We don't want to see a war, Charles. But I think at this point in time, if there were any plans for ECOWAS, to carry out that military intervention, they may have to now shield their swords.
And do you expect other countries, even if they don't have military coups, but just, Sahel countries, the attraction of working together to join this alliance?
Potentially. When you have an alliance that has an open door policy, it's made it very clear that it welcomes its members, then of course, we could potentially have other countries joining. Recently, 24 hours behind, we heard of a potential military coup in Congo Brazzaville, but the government has denied that this is some kind of a rumor. Of course, we know, Charles, that when the coup takes place, a number of hours you've got to give it in order for it to kind of solidify. We're not saying that there is a coup taking place in Congo Brazzaville, but each government would always deny initially that there is an ongoing coup in his country. But it creates a high level of volatility at this point in time when you have 3 countries coming together and forming an alliance and saying we welcome members who are interested. And perhaps this could give some oxygen to brave military men who want to topple governments under the guise of lack of good grasp of the economy or insecurity and all that. And unfortunately, most African countries have those dynamics as we speak.
Yeah, I think this unity is needed in the whole of Africa. And we might worry about the one in the Sahel between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. But I have said before that it is a great thing for us, the Africans, because we must start uniting. The only way we are going to be strong, the only way we are going to get things done in Africa is when we unite and start speaking with a common voice, when we have a common goal for the continent. If we are all just divided by our regional countries or regions, we won't go anywhere. We have seen this happening again and again and again, that a small country in West Africa cannot challenge a mighty country like France. They will be crushed. So Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have realized this and have said to themselves that it's high time we have this military pact. Okay, it's high time we come together and start formulating a way to protect ourselves and also target insurgencies in the Sahel. Because I bet you the insurgency groups in the Sahel is priority number 1 for these countries. Because the only way they can cement themselves in power is when they are able to really tackle these insurgency groups in the Sahel. Without that, they are going to lose legitimacy. So talking about ECOWAS feeling threatened by this, it really doesn't matter, okay, because these countries are thinking about themselves and they are trying to protect themselves. If ECOWAS hadn't threatened to invade Niger militarily, Niger wouldn't be talking about military pact or whatever. And from the reaction the ECOWAS member state got from the general African public, must tell them that people think that ECOWAS' approach to this issue is the wrong one. That ECOWAS talking about invading Niger or intervening in Niger militarily is a very, very terrible idea. Everyone was against it. And that was why ECOWAS even started backtracking on what they said. Africa unity is the best way to go. Because remember, unity is strength. But you guys out there, do you think that this security pact signed between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger is a threat to ECOWAS? It's an anti-ECOWAS union? Shouldn't ECOWAS help these countries fight jihadist movement in the Sahel? Should ECOWAS be encouraging having Western boots on African soil? Share your thoughts and opinions with us in the comment section below, because like always, we love hearing what you have to say. And also, do not forget to like this video, share this video, follow our Facebook page, and most importantly, subscribe to this channel, because little bit of good way, like the one you're doing just now, help us a lot, and we shall forever be grateful to you. So thank you very much for doing just that. And like always, see you in the next one.